Call this meeting to order. Roll call. Council at Large Spear. Here. Council Ward number 1 Leeper. Here. Ward number 2 Anderson. Here. And Ward number 3 McNeil. Here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The agenda approval, if there are no changes.
Just one thing to note, this is an amended resolution laid out with one of the whereases changed.
Resolution number 042219B has a whereas that has been changed. So with that,
there's one correction under the consent agenda. Under Development Director's Report, it says February 2019. It should be April 2019.
all right, so with those two modifications to the agenda, is there a motion to approve?
Motion with those approvals.
Spear with the first and McNeil with the second.
Anderson?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes. To the communications, if there's anybody who would like to address the council, you can make your way to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing there is none, we will close that portion of the meeting and move on to the consent agenda. These can be enacted with one motion, and they are the City Council work session minutes from April 1st, the City Council minutes from April 1st, City Council special meeting minutes from April 10th, Investment and Treasurer's Report from March of 2019, Development Director's Report from March 2019, and Airport minutes from April 10th, 2019, and the claims list. Do any of these need to be pulled out to discuss? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Anderson with the first and Leeper with the second.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
All right, so the next agenda item is a public hearing. This is to solicit written and oral comments on the city's community development block grant application. Is there a motion to open the hearing? McNeil with the first and Leeper with the second.
Leeper? McNeil? Anderson?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
All right, so now the hearing is open at 5:34. Brian?
Well, we don't have any comments coming into the public hearing, but we do have some points of information that we have to cover. And to help us with that is Mark Schneider from ECIA. And so we'll ask Mark to come up to the podium and talk more about this topic. But this again is our application for a housing rehab grant for owner-occupied housing in Census Tract 2, which is generally the northwest quadrant of the city.
All right, thank you for coming.
You bet. Thank you, council members, staff. As Brian mentioned, I've been working with Brian and others here to put together a community development block grant application for the sustainable housing program with the Iowa Economic Development Authority. And the application does require that 9 questions be addressed in the public hearing, and so I'll go through those. First is how the needs for the proposed activities were identified, and the need for the project was identified by city staff based on their knowledge of the city and the windshield survey was conducted. And as Brian mentioned, based on the U.S. Census data, the proposed target area has the highest low and moderate income population within the city based on the current estimates from the American Community Survey. And the combination of these factors document the need for the additional rehabilitation assistance within the city. You may recall that probably 15 years ago the city's had a couple of housing rehabilitation programs in the city, and that would be another one at this point. Proposed activities would be funded with a $251,000 CDBG grant that includes the rehabilitation work and administrative fees. The city would use that $251,000 to fund rehabilitation activities that are identified in the CDBG application. The city would offer homeowners the use of also Tipton's home loan fund that can provide up to $10,000 per property for eligible improvements if there's additional funding above the program caps that are provided on individual properties. Third is the date the application will be submitted. It will be submitted to meet the May 4, 2019 deadline. Again, as noted, the amount of funds being requested for CDBG funds is $251,000. The estimated portion of CDBG funds that will benefit low and moderate income persons would be the funds that benefit persons and households that have incomes verified earning less than 80% of the county median, which is established by HUD each year based on household size, and 100% of the funds benefit persons with projects that are below that low and moderate income guideline. Proposed activities where they would be conducted would be within an identified target area in the city, which is, again, Census Tract 4503, Block Group 2, and it's bound by the city limits on the north and west sides, and the east boundary is Cedar Street from the north city limits to 13th to East 13th Street, then east on 13th to North Avenue, south on North Avenue to East 10th Street, East 10th Street to Meridian Street, south on Meridian to East 7th, and then west on East 7th and West 7th Streets to the west city limits. The plans to minimize displacement of persons and businesses by design of the application and project, there would be no displacement of households or businesses. However, there will likely be temporary relocation required in homes where lead-based paint is identified or presumed to be present, and the budget will contain funds to pay for that temporary relocation when it's required. Plans to assist persons actually displaced in the city, again, anticipates no displacement. However, because of the fact that they are CDBG federal funds, the city does agree to comply fully with the Uniform Relocation Act and/or Section 104D of the Housing and Community Development Act as amended, should there be some displacement. And lastly, the nature of the proposed activities is the project includes the providing of rehabilitation assistance to low and moderate income households within that selected target area within the city. And those are the 9 questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Could you just speak generally about how, if awarded, the grant funds are used on an individual home?
Sure. The previous programs you've had very specific rehabilitation activities spelled out within an administrative plan that was approved by the state Economic Development Authority. Today, they are much more lenient, less restrictive in what they are requiring to be done. There are things that they will require, such as smoke detectors, and they now dictate that there must be a radon test done. It would be up to the property owner if that if it does test high above that 4 microcuries per whatever it is liter, it's up to the property owner if they want to have a radon system installed or not. And typically what that comes down to is what the budget is. And the state will provide up to $24,999 on rehabilitation work. Again, that's going to be such things as smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, potentially radon system if it's required or indicated it should be installed at least. Beyond that, we typically will look at lead-based paint items, and normally we'll presume there's lead-based paint there if the house is older than 1978 construction date. And we do that because there's additional funds in the budget to address lead-based paint hazards. And if we were to test those properties with an XRF and actually identify yes or no, if they turn out to be all no's, we literally can't use those funds. But if it's presumed to be present, then we are able to use those funds. Other work typically becomes anywhere from roofing to insulation to water heaters, furnace, electrical upgrades, siding, windows, and pretty much anything is an option for the property owner beyond those initial couple at this point. And again, program available if somebody does have work that's identified and should be taken care of and they need additional funds, they have that option to access the city's loan program to use that money additionally. That money is being identified as an option to property owners, but not being pledged as match. Typically, in the past, there was a match that's pledged, and so by structuring that being an option to the property owner, it's not pledged. And so, if it's used, it'll be identified as part of a match to the program. If it's not used, there's no match requirement. Again, that used to be the state had a requirement, match monies to be provided, and they would fund them typically based on that match. That was, to some degree at least, a requirement. In the last couple of years, the states received guidance from HUD that changed the rules to how they're administering the program, such that it used to be they allowed the state, or they allowed the city to go above the 24,999 as long as those funds above the 24,999 were not federal dollars. And HUD has now told them that regardless of where those funds come, if it is a rehabilitation activity and you're providing over 24,999 on that house, regardless of the funding source, it dictates you must address all lead-based paint hazards. And so that's why the state suddenly has changed that they're not really dictating to any degree that you need to provide a match. And it's not even a scoring criteria at this point. So that's a major change in how the program's operated from previously.
Just wanted to mention that other participation in the draft that I provided in your packet. It's a program that is tentatively called Tipton Housing Fund. And it goes back to 2017 when there was an expression of desire among the council to try to come up with a program that is like the recent lending you've done for businesses, where you've done the 5 to 7 years. In that case, in the cases of those loans, 0.5% interest, generally up to 10,000, but you exceeded that in at least one case. This would look at doing a program that's much the same as far as rules go, except it would be for housing activities, housing rehab. Now, with the first part of it, we have some ability to do an internal loan that can be paid back from housing TIF set-aside funds. Those funds aren't all present now. Some of them are just on the come because we can project out over the life of the TIF district the TIF agreements that we have with the owners of those subdivisions, and I think we projected around 65,000 or so that eventually would come in. So initially, we could start a program if the council wanted to provide an internal loan of, say, 60,000, just to use that example, and use housing TIF as it comes in to pay that back. We could look at perhaps 5 such projects. If the program became popular, we might have to look at other funds that wouldn't be reimbursable, but they would be able to revolve. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is, if you go ahead with the resolution that mentions this Tipton Home Loan Fund later in your agenda, where you're having the chance to approve this application moving forward, then I'll be back within the next meeting or the meeting after that to have you discuss formalizing that home loan fund and maybe identify a source of funds for the internal loan. So I wanted to mention that before you get to that item, that right now the way it's written, doing the one thing means working on the development of the other. At least to me it does, because that's a program the council wanted to pursue. This is an opportunity to match it with the CDBG program.
So with the maximum 24,999, and you've got 250,000 available overall in the grant, approximately. So potentially 10 homeowners could take advantage of this, and that.
It would be 6 homeowners. And the 24,999 is the lead, I'm sorry, the rehab, and then there's an additional, I think it's $5,500 to address the lead hazards within the property that would be presumed to be present. And then there's also temporary relocation funds,
Right.
and then administrative fees.
So it could be as few as 6 potential homeowners could take
The
advantage of it.
program target is 6, and that would be the target,
Okay.
and that 6 is actually dictated by the state.
Okay.
We can't set it up above that.
If this is approved, when is the starting of the application process?
I think the award is July, I remember.
I don't remember exactly. I didn't know them to turn around that fast, but maybe they do now.
Still 3 months.
And once this is established, how long of a period will this continue? Will it be available? Well, what's the length of time?
Until the money's going,
Or
and then, or 3 years. The contracts with the state lights are all 3 years.
3 years? So potentially it could go 3 years unless they're all used up.
And actually, if they're used up quickly, at this point, there's pre-applications have been submitted, so there's definitely interest. If the money were expended quickly, the state is willing to look at issuing an amendment and increasing the budget to do additional houses.
Good.
I
Okay,
think
thanks.
on the last count, we had
13.
13 pre-applications.
Good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for stopping in. If there's no more questions for Brian and Mark, I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Spear with first and Leeper with the second.
McNeil. Anderson.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
Leeper.
Yes.
All right, so we'll move down to H, which is the Arbor Day proclamation. And it says, whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now therefore I, Brian Carney, Mayor of the City of Tipton, do hereby proclaim April 26, 2019 as Arbor Day in the City of Tipton, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees, woodlands, and further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. There you go, that's the resolution for Arbor Day.
You read that, yeah.
So now we'll move on to beautiful new business. First one is a discussion of possible action concerning Chalice Lawn Care bid for spraying in the park. Sounds like a community event,
Yeah, I brought this to your attention last council meeting, and everything was kosher with you guys. Just had to bring it to your attention again to actually receive the bill.
So if there's no questions for Adam, is there a motion?
So moved.
Spear with the first and Leeper with the second.
Anderson.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
Leeper.
Yes.
McNeil.
All right, then the next one, which is a discussion of possible action concerning the approval of the park's new zero-turn mower.
Okay, we have, I have multiple bids from those three, from Kennedy, P&K, and Klein, and the three that we thought was best. I brought all three quotes to Clay, because he's gonna be the main one servicing the mower, and he he said, it's up to me. I said, well, you're the one that's gonna be servicing it, and first words out of his mouth was John Deere. Worked with John Deere, but I'm okay. So I said John Deere in the write-up, but I know it's not local, so I'm gonna go by what the council decides if they wanna stay local. I'm totally fine with that. Clay was totally fine with either one, Cub Cadet or John Deere. But his first words out of his mouth was John Deere, so that's why I went with, because he's always worked on John Deere. So, but I'm personally okay with whatever.
Any thoughts or anything?
Yeah, I've
Brad,
had
or
both,
questions?
but I'm a John Deere fan.
Okay.
All right,
Hard to kill.
Yeah, pretty much.
we'll do our best.
Yeah.
Oh. Mine's about 16 years old now and still runs good. Nothing runs like a deer.
If there aren't any questions for Adam, is there a motion
So moved.
for the John Deere?
Yes, sir.
Leaper with the first to approve the John Deere purchase,
Second?
and Spear with the second.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Number 3, which is a resolution approving the Community Development Block Grant Housing Sustainability Application and pledging a local match. Right?
I guess before we have you vote on that, I do want to acknowledge, in particular, Deb and Cindy, our city hall staff. The state was looking for strong interest, and along with running newspaper ads and Stewart's newspaper coverage, they did bill stuffings for that particular Track 2 area. They tried to help identify people that might be qualified and encouraged them and followed up with them to turn in these pre-applications. And I thought for a while, the goal was to try to get 12 in order to apply for 6. And they got 13 for us. But they had, not all 13, but a big part of those 13. So I just wanted to mention that.
All right. So does anybody have any questions for Brian regarding the application? Seeing there are none, is there a motion? McNeil with the first, and Anderson with the second.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
All right, the next one, which is ordinance 569, it amends water utility rates of the city code of ordinances, and this would be the first reading. Right.
This ordinance and the next one are follow-ups to clarify both ordinances to say that the charges, whatever the charges are per meter per month. And you might remember that, we talked about that. The changes are clarifications of the council's intent. You can do it as 3 readings over 3 meetings if you want to. For these 2 ordinances, this could be a situation where you want to consider waiving readings in order to do all 3.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that? All right, so I have to ask for a motion to suspend the rules?
Well, you do the first reading, and
Oh, yeah,
then a
that's right.
motion to suspend the rules and move to the second and third.
That's right. So is there a motion to pass this first reading?
So moved.
Spear with first and Leeper with the second?
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
So then moving forward, is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Yeah.
Anderson with the first and Leeper with the second?
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
All right, so is there then now a motion to continue with the second and third readings? Wait.
Second.
Oh, yeah, sorry, second, and then we'll do the third, yeah. Leeper with the first
Second.
and McNeil with the second?
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
And is there a motion to pass the third reading?
So moved.
Lieber with the first and Spear with the second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber.
Yes. All right, so is there a motion now to reinstate the rules?
So moved.
Spear with the first and Lieber with the second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber.
Yes. All right, so now to the next agenda item, which is ordinance number 570. And it is the first reading of the gas utility rates. And as Brian said, this cleans up the language for the meter issue that we had, with multiple meters on a building. There are no discussion points on this. I'd ask for a motion to pass this first reading. Who? Lieber with the first and Anderson with the second.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes. All right, is there a motion to suspend the rules on this one? Lieber with the first and McNeil with the second.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Is there a motion now to pass the second reading? Anderson with the first and McNeil with the second.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
And a motion for the third reading. Lieber with the first and McNeil with the second.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
All right, so those both passed. Is there a motion now to reinstate the rules? McNeil with the first and Lieber with the second?
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Lieber,
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
All right, so now to number 6, which is another ordinance. This one amends the chapter 106, collection of solid waste, and it applies to the schedule of fees. Brian or Steve?
I think on this one, actually, I'm gonna toss it to Melissa. She did the
Melissa.
financial,
Even better.
yes. She did the financial analysis on this and she also drafted the ordinance that you're reviewing for tonight.
The last council meeting, Steve talked about the increased recycling costs that we've been experiencing, and possible suggestions for offsetting those costs. And one of the suggestions was adding a fee to our recycling, which we don't have currently. So I did a financial analysis to see what that fund was experiencing, and on average, it's approximately $63,000 a year with personnel costs and then the operating cost of the recycling fund. So then below, I looked at the utility accounts and how much, you'll see there's 5 different rate increases to see what they would do to help offset those expenses. And coming in at $3.50 would actually be a recommended amount to add, which would come to $71,400. And the reason that I'm recommending that is to avoid having to set it at a lower rate now, and then the expenses continue to increase, and we have to bring this back to you in a year or two to increase the rate again. So trying to be a little bit more proactive about it as costs are going to continue to increase. We know that, so that's why the recommendation was the $3.50.
Any questions for Melissa, Brian, or Steve?
Melissa and I spoke about it, and, you know, I'm kind of on the fence about going to that degree at this point. I don't know how, if I think it's best to take it all up front and not have to go back, which, you know, gets us into the problem we're in
Yeah.
if we don't do that. But otherwise, I hate to take, you know, more than we might need down the road, and
Well, even looking at the fees, between the 5 of them, the next one that would cover it is $3.25.
yeah.
So, you know, you can kind of go between those two, and
And it goes back to us not having any increases along with the way wages increasing,
Yep.
insurance increasing, and
recycling
possibly
sales,
recycling.
yeah, have decreased, so. If you have anything else?
Only that, you know, keep in mind that we have lost quite a bit of ground over the last year. So a little bump up, yeah, beyond what we're actually experiencing in our costs could be justified in my mind. We probably lost, I'm gonna say 8,000 to 10,000.
Yeah, it hasn't
In the
been
last year.
profitable the last couple of
No,
years.
no.
Help to pick recycling up once a month? Twice?
You know, we can get 2 full loads out of town on a regular basis. More than that during the holidays. If you just picked it up, you would, of course, decrease your cost of pickup and delivery, but your dump charges would still be the same. You could probably, don't even tell Roger I said this, but you could probably do the whole town, and we used to do it, as you guys well remember, the whole town in one day. And that would have to happen though, every week. There's just too much recycling out there. The response to recycling is incredible.
Mhm. I'm just a family of one, and 2 weeks is about all I can go.
For recycling?
Yeah. Oh, I'm supposed to pack it in.
I do.
I didn't think it would come out.
Okay, so is there a motion on the schedule of fee?
I would move that we increase to the 350.
Spear as a first to increase to 350, and McNeil with a second.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Alright, next one is a discussion of possible action approving a farm lease agreement for Brad Stephen Kroc. Mr. Wagner?
Yes, this is for approximately 12 acres north of the West Lagoon site. The amount is, generally it's $250 per acre. It is for 1 year only. And the reason why we're looking at it as 1 year only is we thought as the year plays out, we'll get a better idea of how the land use for the upcoming wastewater treatment project is going to occur. And if it looks like it's not going to really affect this land, it could be renewed or rebid or whatever the council would like to do. But, you know, there are some questions about borrow areas, and we think we have that identified. We don't think it'll involve this, but we'd still like to see how that year plays out. So this has been made for no more than a year, and then we would give the typical code required notification of termination by September 1 if it came to that.
Alright, any questions for Brian regarding this agreement? Is there a motion one way or the other? Anderson with the first and Leeper with the second.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
If I could ask, now, we haven't shown this to the farmer yet, to our Kroc family. I guess what I would ask is if I could have a little flexibility to change some of the terms of this if it helps make a deal, but I would not do anything that would create a significant change. It would change the spirit of this. But there might be some slight word changes that they might ask for that won't really affect this here and there.
Nick? Yep. Number 8, discussion of possible action concerning increasing employee health insurance contribution. Ms. Armstrong?
Our current health insurance plan renews on 5/1, and during the budget time, we talked that the plan adjustment increase was 5.9%. So thankfully, the budget was able to absorb that increase, but the Scott Wilkins, our plan administrator, thought it'd be a great idea to get an insurance committee together to just talk about ways, either now or in the future, that we can help offset costs or tweak the plan to be in the best interest for the city and the employees. So during some of those insurance meetings, we talked about what we could do to help offset the costs. And since the budget was able to absorb the increase itself, the committee thought that it would still be a good idea to increase the employee's contribution monthly. So you'll see in here, the risk that the partial self-funding site has is all based off of claims that are turned in each month. So that is a variable that we're not going to be able to predict very easily, and it's going to fluctuate. So what was suggested was to do a $5 monthly increase for all employees' health insurance contributions that would just help offset the risk that's associated with that fund. So that plan is proposed to be in effect on 5/1 with our renewal.
I love that this came from the employees.
Yep, it keeps everyone informed, and we did that, an employee from every department, so that they could go back and give the information so everyone has knowledge.
All right. Any questions for Melissa? Seeing there is none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Spear with the first and Leeper with the second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
Alright, number 9, which is discussion of possible action concerning a request for proposals for city audit services. Ms. Armstrong?
This is a request for proposal for a audit service. As you know, we've used Tipton, Larson and Allen for many, many years, and they've been a great audit company. But what we wanted to do was get approval from the council to go out for proposals again, to have a document that gives specifications of what we're looking for, qualifications, and just to renew what we've had, just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and it protects the city too. So this would be a 3-year term. It really doesn't have a lot of significant difference from what we're currently what we've had in the past. They would still do certain reports for us, but what it does do is it gives a more specific timeline for when things are due, and it gives more detail of what we're expecting, our expectations as a city. So this request would be to allow me to go out for proposals for that. They would be due on the 27th of May, and then we would come back with a recommendation for the council, your first meeting in June.
Alright. There are no questions for Melissa. Is there a motion? Anderson with the first and Leeper with the second.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Alright, number 10, which is discussion and possible action concerning adopting a revised gas operator qualifications plan. Virgil?
The write-up says our utility board was inspected on all and went over the operations and maintenance plan that they had, which is the same plan that all municipals that are with IED have. And so they wrote us over in violation, but you made those changes, and now we need to adopt a new plan.
Alright.
Are you happy with them?
IUB or IED?
Are you happy with the changes?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You're
the man.
If there are no other questions for Virgil, is there a motion?
So moved.
Leeper with the first
Yes.
Second?
and Spear with the second.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Alright, the next one, which is discussion of possible action concerning adopting a revised gas operations and maintenance plan.
Well, one was the emergency plan, emergency response plan, and the other one was operations and maintenance plan.
Alright,
Just like the first one, IUB wasn't happy with some of the wording, so they changed it. Now we have to adopt a new plan.
alright. There are no questions for Virgil, is there a motion?
So moved.
Leeper with the first and Anderson with the second.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil, Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Thank you, Virgil.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marge.
Now to number 12, which is discussion of possible action concerning approving a ventilator maintenance agreement with Zoll Medical Corporation. Mr. Ratliff?
Thank you. We have a couple ventilators that we've acquired that need to have some maintenance put on them. Unfortunately, the one tough thing about them is that the only company that services them is Zoll, the manufactures them. So we're kind of in a bind right there. It's a product that needs to be maintenance on an annual basis, and the cost is $595. This year we need to put in batteries inside the units, which is an additional $200. But I think it's a phenomenal product. They certainly will be helping us with our patient care and safety.
All right. There are no questions for Mr. Ratliff. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Anderson with the first and Spear with the second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
Number 13, discussion of possible action concerning approving up to $5,000 per year for a medical director insurance.
So speaking of ventilators, it goes into the word risk. We have a new medical director. In the past, our medical director was supplied through the University of Iowa, and part of our terms with them was that they provided malpractice insurance. Our new medical director is not affiliated with the University of Iowa, and his one main condition that he had when we brought him on was that he was provided with malpractice insurance. It's not something that's provided by the hospital that he works at. They cover the physician while they're underneath the auspice of the hospital, not doing them and considered an extracurricular activity like helping out an EMS agency. I think this is a great option for us. The medical director, we don't necessarily see a physician inside of an ambulance, but my staff and I are all extensions of the medical director, thus any of the work that we do can be tied back to him and his protocols or his direction. Therefore, he does incur a tremendous amount of risk and liability with it. So I searched out, and unfortunately there were very few policies out there that really cover a medical director. Most people don't want to cover one. The city's insurance does not cover professional liabilities for a physician under these circumstances. So the company that I found that I just felt that did a phenomenal job at covering a physician was through NFP Insurance. I ran it past Mike Pelzer, and I actually ran it past our resident, Matt McCall, and they both liked the policy and felt that it was fairly comprehensive to what we would need. The cost of it is between $4,500 and $5,000 annually. The variable is based off of $4,500 and $5,000 annually. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The variable in there is based off of the Iowa filing fee for the physician.
All right. There are any questions for Director Ratliff? There are none. Is there a motion to approve? Spear with the first. And Leeper with the second.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper, McNeil,
Yes. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
I appreciate it.
Number 14, discussion of possible action concerning a purchase of a secondary transformer for the Cedar County Co-op. Mr. Tabor?
Good evening.
Hi.
This transformer is normally something that we do not stock and we do not carry. I was asked by Josh Christ, who's doing the work out there at the Co-op, for this transformer. They thought we had one that we'd been storing for them. We do, but it's not the right voltage that they want. So I went ahead and I got a quote, and this place has got the quickest turnaround, 4 to 5 weeks, which will fit with their timeline. And this will be a pass-through cost. We will pay for it, but the co-op will be expected to reimburse us for it. They said they might give us $75 for the other transformer, which it's $1 a kVA trade-in, but they're basing it off a junk price, and he says, and that's if the oil's not contaminated. So, but the good part is, we might be able to give the co-op $75 back. If not, if any of the oil's contaminated or anything, then we're gonna have to charge them to dispose of the transfer oil. So, but that's one thing that they do know. They know all this up front. I told that to Josh, and was gonna talk to Dave out there and let them know. So, it's, like I say, it'll just be a pass-through cost, and they'll have it here within 4 to 5 weeks.
All right. Any questions before? There are none. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Leeper with the first. And McNeil with the second?
Spear.
Yes.
Leeper.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Alright, so then to 15, which is discussion and possible action concerning the approval of a new electric utility rebate program.
Okay, the Iowa Association of Municipal Utilities has come up with a new rebate program that we could sign up for. They basically will administer it, and we will pay the customer for their rebate items. Currently, the program that we are using now is one that I basically stole from CIPCO, and I've been using it. And this year, I got an email from the Energy and Information Administration and the Iowa Utilities Board wanting to know why there's been less interest in our rebate program. Well, a lot of it is I don't think the customers really understand that if you buy a SEER furnace or a central air unit and the SEER number is only 13 and it needs to be at least a 15, that you won't get a rebate. So what we're finding out is I've had to write one gal 2 rejection letters because everything she's bought she can't get rebates for because, and I don't think she understood how the program worked. Evidently you had some formatting problems with this. Because it's not how I sent it.
Oh, the print it off, yeah.
No, because I got it on an iPad, I don't know, do you have it printed off?
Yeah.
Because when I look at it on here, it's nothing like what I had in my office.
I think she was trying to cut it down from,
From having that big
yeah,
white sheet, okay. But at any rate, what it does is it allows us to be able to put it on our website. At 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody gets up and they want to type all their information in and stuff like that and send it to IAMU. IAMU will go through all the documents and everything else, and they will approve or not approve the application. Some of them will get kicked back because the customer didn't fill out all the information. But, you know, it's a simple thing that they can just rectify by just fixing it and sending it back. So it kind of takes us out of the middle of it, of approving and not approving. So I know I've had some disagreements and, you know, Tanya and I, we've talked about it, and I said, yeah, it needs to be a little bit more cut and dried, and the program that we're currently using really isn't. So, and I think this will kind of jumpstart the program, and then that way I can say to the EIA and the IUB that we're working on making it so that it's better. And there's this thing that I filled out about the applications and stuff like that. So, and there's things to put on the website. Does the city have a Facebook page?
Yes.
Okay, and then there's things you can put on social media too. I didn't fill all that stuff out, it just kind of gives you an idea. And I don't even know if I got, is it the city of Tipton at tiptoniowa.org? Oh, I guessed right. But at any rate, I'm hoping it'll jumpstart the program and get it going a little bit better. And so it's easier for the customers to understand and use.
Sounds good. Sounds like a win for the customers. Is there any questions for Floyd? If there are none, is there a motion to pass? Lieber with the first, McNeil with the second.
Leeper.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
And just to let you know, I forgot to say, it will take effect July 1st. I'll let the current program expire. We'll still honor it for 6 months after, I think it's 6 months. It's either 3 months or 6 months. We'll honor it for so much time after that, then after that we won't. So, but at any rate, that it'll start July 1st.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Floyd. Thanks for looking out for the utility customers too. The next one, which is number 16, which is discussion and possible action concerning a one-time water and sewer bill exemption at 422 West 7th Street. Is there any questions concerning this one? Seeing there are none, and it matches all the criteria, is there a motion? Spear first and Leeper second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear, Leeper.
Yes.
Alright, so it's 17, which is a resolution. This is the one that had been modified slightly. It's a resolution opposing HF 773 and SSB 1260, a property tax reform bill that is under current consideration in the Iowa legislature. Right?
Well, this one too is one that I think I'll also call on Melissa to get into a little bit of the financial analysis that she made on how this might impact us, but it's meant to be a limitation on city and county government on the rate of growth that a budget can have. They've come up with the figure of 2%, not including debt service. They would do away with the 810 levy and all of the non-voted levies. The voted levies would remain, and then there would be this growth factor. The problem that cities have with this, and the reason why this, I guess the timing of this is, the League of Cities and counties have been following the progress of this legislation as it's gone through the legislative session. Now that it has more of a schedule for debate and that it's still alive, cities are trying to pass resolutions like this to oppose it, largely because it goes against the idea of home rule. You know, that locally elected people can make decisions regarding the unit of government that they are in charge of. Do you want to talk a little bit about your analysis of how this would affect us in particular?
Well, as you're all aware, the increase in infrastructure costs, healthcare costs, healthcare last year alone was a 10% increase. So those are major factors, and we've been lucky enough to be able to levy 100% for the healthcare, the insurance costs, and those things that we can levy 100% for, which helps save the other money to do infrastructure and other needed expenses. So I looked at the FY19 budget just to give you an idea of what that would do, and if we had a 2% cap, it would be $31,052 of additional revenue that we could use. So looking at that, with a 2% increase that was given to employee wages, $12,222 of that $31,000 would be needed to pay for those 2% wages increase. And those wages increase are helping stay in line with the cost of living increases that are implemented and to keep us in line with the new Verify studies. That's a pretty essential thing. So the remaining would be $18,830, which would be very minimal to help do infrastructure, street maintenance, anything that we couldn't fund internally. So it's a very significant difference, and it would really reduce our abilities to continue moving forward. So like Brian said, this would just help show cities' support to oppose this legislation.
And I don't know if the current version says this, but in one version, if a city wanted to go beyond the 2%, you could only do it by way of a local referendum, which would have an expense of a special election. It would have whatever amount of time it takes to set up the election. So, you know, the thing that is a little bit bothersome, at least to me, is it's like the state legislature is finding some sort of problem with local officials that only can be seen from the state level. I think one of the concerns is if a city does nothing with its tax rate and property tax values increase, you'll have a corresponding increase in revenue. And that was inferred to by one elected person at the state level as being sort of dishonest, that cities are saying they're not raising your rate, but they're getting more revenue because of an increase in value. And at the same time, they're not lowering the rate, say, by a corresponding amount that the increased value brought in. And so he suggested there was a certain level of dishonesty if a city says, well, we didn't change our tax rate. Well, cities didn't create the system that they're talking about. We didn't create the method by which property is assessed. We live with it just like every other level of government that's based on that sort of system. So why cities and counties in particular are being singled out, and why these same growth rules aren't being applied to the state by the state as they would to us, I don't know. But it has caused a certain amount of concern or even frustration by different cities, and so this is based on a model we received, but this amended portion was particularly tailored to Tipton, that when sent in, it'll give an example of how it would have affected us in the upcoming year if it had existed then.
Any questions for Brian or Melissa? Is there a motion to pass this resolution? McNeil was first and Spear with the second.
Anderson?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Leeper?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
I'm sorry, just what?
I had an email from the League of Cities, and that bill did come out of the study committee last, April 18th was Thursday, and it's now signed Senate File 634. And they have a recap, or a summary of the differences between the House file and the Senate file. And I don't know if you want to, that's worthy of note, or you want to look at it?
Right.
Brian can look at it?
Yes, Brian.
There's a summary of them, a couple of them in particular on your caps and the referendum. There's a hard cap of 3% on the Senate file.
There's a lot of sorting out to do. One of the other things that this reminds me of is, in the House file, they had a requirement where a general fund reserve couldn't exceed 25% of the general fund budget amount. And usually that is a target that cities and maybe even counties try to obtain, just as a rule of thumb. The Senate version doesn't have that, the House version does. Well, it kind of, getting back to the home rule idea, if the voters are okay with, say, a county having more than 25%, but because of that have low or no debt, because they do have a significant reserve, then why isn't that a local issue? Why can't that be decided locally? And that's where a lot of the rub comes with this type of legislation. But there are a number of other things, and I'm assuming that we have this email too, but we'll forward it out to you tomorrow, but there are a number of significant differences.
All right. So I can't remember where we were at. Did we second that?
Yep.
Yes. So, Amy will, did we take a vote on it?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, sure did.
It's been a long one. All right, so now to number 18, discussion of possible action acknowledging Leanne Boots' resignation from the city council, and then also the consideration of how to fill that vacancy. Mr. Wagner? Excuse me.
Well, you do have time, from the date of her, that her resignation became effective. You've got 60 days to either fill the position by appointment or call for a special election. Now, there's also a mechanism by which the voters can petition an election. For example, if you appoint someone and there's disagreement on who that is, they can petition for an election. You know, and that's not the only petition option they have. I think they have, well, I guess I don't want to quote it and then have it be wrong, but there is a petition option where they have 14 days from whenever it's printed in the paper of your intention to appoint, or from the date of the effective day of the resignation, I think whatever is last. So let's say you decide that your intent is to appoint, we would place a public notice in the paper, and then there'd be a clock ticking where somebody could petition an election, as an example. But if you want to use some time to try to avoid the expense of a special election and find a candidate that the majority of you agree on, if not all of you, and the public would not feel triggered to do a petition, then you do have some time. So then the question becomes, how do you field candidates who might be interested? And one of the things that I know has been discussed is to make public your intention to appoint and solicit letters of interest, letters of application, however you might want to call it, so that you can see what comes in, evaluate it, and then even then you could still call for a special election if you want to.
And it looks like our 60 days is up on June 18th. Would that be right? Did I count correctly?
What does the 60 days mean, Brian? Someone would have to be appointed by then, or would
Or
it-
special election.
or the special election?
Yeah, and if you can't appoint somebody in 60 days, then it defaults to a special election. I think we had, Melissa, was the estimate of a special election
3,000?
3,000. So that was one consideration. We thought if you could find somebody that was by and large agreeable, you could avoid the expense of that, especially when you have the regular election coming up soon after. The person you appoint, if they want, they could serve only until the November election. Or if they want, they can be a candidate. Whoever wins the November election would serve out Leanne's final 2 years.
I like the idea of soliciting letters. And so what should be the deadline for that? Our first meeting in May is the 6th, and then our second one is the 20th.
Oh,
Well, let's see. I wouldn't shoot for the first May meeting. I wouldn't look for the council to appoint somebody at least until the second May meeting. I think the first May meeting
Well,
might be soon.
No, I meant to gather the letters, set a deadline for the letters being in.
so that we could do, appoint by the second meeting.
Yeah,
So you might want to look at around May 15,
all right.
if the Wednesday before is okay.
Is that amenable by everyone?
Sounds good.
All right, so, does that need to be a motion? Okay.
Yeah. It would be-
A motion to, or should there be two separate ones to accept her resignation?
Yeah, you could do that, and then you could do a motion. You know, in fact, we may have to bring a resolution to acknowledge her resignation, or her letter of resignation, and then instruct us to publicize your interest in doing letters of interest.
So first, is there a motion to accept?
I would make a motion to accept and thank her.
Spear with the first, and McNeil with the second.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yes.
McNeil, Anderson,
Yes.
And then a motion to direct the city staff on notifying the public of how and where to send letters if the public wants to express interest in joining the city council by appointment.
That's a lot of words.
I know, I was kind of making it up as I went
can you just
along.
write that down for me?
I know.
I'm making a motion to set the date to have those interested in by the May 15th. Do I have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll work,
And-
good.
As the 15th.
All right, Spear with the first, and Anderson with the second.
Spear,
Yes.
Leeper,
Yeah.
McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
And I think we have to do a resolution at your next meeting where it cites a code section. So we'll have something, more than likely, we'll have something prepared for your next meeting that will address that requirement.
All right, so down to the reports, mayor's report. This isn't so much a report, but just as Pam stated, I would like to thank Leanne. She's not here, but maybe she'll watch us on the internet someday soon, and I'd just like to thank her for all of her expertise and help in making all the decisions up here on the council. That's it from me. Council report, committee report, city manager report, department heads. And now we are down to adjournment. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Second?
Anderson with first and Spear with second.
Leeper, McNeil,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
We are adjourned.